He appears and disappears before my eyes. I see him who is many, those who will test the unforgiven. In one hand he bears hope, in the other, despair. I speak of Cypher. Each time he comes closer. Among the fallen there is one whom the Dark Angel's masters seek with greater fervour than others. He hides in the shadows. Every step of his is shrouded in mystery, and his motives and actions themselves constitute riddles. Even his name or title seems to conceal something, though it is unclear whether it's a metaphor or another enigma. He is Cypher, the most reviled of all enemies of the Dark Angels. The fall of Caliban was the last of the horrific catastrophes that erupted within the Imperium during the bloody days of the Horus heresy. Since then, Cypher has spent 10 millennia on the run, during which he has visited each of the 5 segmenti, appearing as if from nowhere. Death and destruction follow closely in his wake, but it is unknown whether Cypher is the cause of the tragedy or merely a harbinger. Despite the reports often being too biased, it seems that Cypher rarely is the perpetrator of the atrocities that invariably occur in his presence, serving more as a catalyst that stokes the hatred and distrust of the people surrounding him into a raging, unstoppable inferno. And then Cypher vanishes. As suddenly as he appears, he leaves no hint of where he intends to appear next. Only burning worlds. Besides chaos and destruction, Cypher leaves another trail behind. Legends and rumors about the enigmatic wanderer in a robe. The interest surrounding his sudden disappearances is inevitably fueled by a subsequent wave of questions. Sometimes they are asked by inquisitors and their agents, and sometimes by Chaos Space Marines seeking information about the mysterious warrior who occasionally appears in their fortresses but never reveals his true name or purpose. However, regardless of who was seeking information about Cypher, the Dark Angels are always on his trail. Grim warriors, pursuing their own goals, interrogate everyone who has encountered or might have spoken to Cypher, leading witnesses with information away by the head chaplain's interrogators. Few return. No one can say for certain who or what Cypher is. Those who have seen him in battle report that, like many Dark Angels, he wears a simple ceremonial robe beneath which glimpses thick plates of dark power armor. Another interesting fact is that wherever Cypher appears, Dark Angels or their successors inevitably follow. The Sons of the Lion ask many questions, but never provide answers. Despite the constant hunt for Cypher, no one has yet managed to catch or destroy him, or so it may seem, as the Dark Angels have considered the Wanderer dead several times, yet he returns each time. The infuriated Red Corsairs, who believe Cypher betrayed them during the Escavan campaign, thought they had cornered the elusive Wanderer on the strike cruiser Rapier. However, upon halting their ship in the depths of space, they discovered it contained only cultists. None of the lost souls, before their demise, managed to reveal where the enigmatic stranger was now, or where and how he vanished. The librarians of the Dark Angels, having studied the information gathered on the activities of Cypher, understand that through his actions he is, in his own way, consistently pursuing a goal known only to him. It is impossible to determine whether Cypher fights for the Imperium or against it. Whether he is a friend or foe to those who betrayed the Dark Angels, Cypher does not always work alone. There are times when he negotiates or collaborates with others, and his very presence on a planet seems to attract dangerous forces from across the galaxy. Whether this occurs at the stranger's will is unclear, but it happens too frequently to dismiss as mere chance. Cypher remains forever a lone, uncontrollable element, cloaking his true intentions even from his allies. Cypher's ability to persuade others only adds trouble for his pursuers. Those who follow his convoluted trail rarely learn anything valuable from those whose help the stranger enlisted for his secretive goals. Cypher left behind entire armies of cultists, eager for newfound power, greedy bands of pirates and isolated colonies merely trying to survive in wastelands. Once he even managed to mislead an Inquisition kill team. Only after the operation was it revealed that Cypher had assumed the guise of Inquisitor Arnold. The subsequent investigation showed that the Inquisitor, hiding horrific wounds beneath his hood, had been killed many months prior. In the guise of the Inquisitor, Cypher utilized his network of agents to disrupt the defenses of Septia 7, leading to the complete destruction of the Imperial hive world. Accusing the planetary governor and his entire ruling system of corruption and fraud, the stranger declared himself the legitimate ruler, and the tithes began regularly flowing from the planet once more. The uprising brought the planet's inhabitants a brief freedom, followed by the inevitable brutal invasion, crushing the people's will under the banner of the Imperium once again. Some of the documented appearances of Cypher are superficial, as he was seen only at the onset of a conflict. However, in other cases, his involvement appears more profound. According to the Dark Angel's archives, the stranger spent 20 Terran years in the cult of the Red Heresy, a burgeoning anarchist movement led by agitators from the 7 star systems. However, it is unclear whether he led the cult or merely manipulated it for his purposes. It is known that during this time he joined a fleet of smugglers, and in both instances he did not attempt to hide his identity. Cypher is always clad in a robe and hood, carrying with him 2 ancient, masterfully crafted pistols and a sword which he never unsheathes. Deep within the dungeons of the Rock, the asteroid monastery fortress of the Dark Angels, beneath the Librarium, there lie secret halls that only the most experienced librarians may enter. All the gathered knowledge about Cypher is stored there. The Grand Master of the Librarius and his trusted aides search for information about his enigmatic deeds among ancient scrolls, video files, and illuminated cogitators. There, the elusive watchers in the dark wander the long corridors of the archives, where speculation and documented reports are kept, and halls are arranged with maps of planets, sectors, and even entire segmentums, tracking both confirmed and unconfirmed events. Visual contacts, psychic imprints, and even potential future events predicted by the librarians, unraveling the threads of fate, are mapped there. Even if one forgets about the usual unreliable rumors about Cypher's appearances, a whole lifetime could be spent studying the collected materials. According to information obtained in the Hall of Mysteries, in more than half of the cases, Cypher acts alongside other forces. But this, like everything with the Wanderer, only raises new questions. It can be said with certainty that Cypher prefers to work with humans, only occasionally collaborating with Xenos. However, what can be learned from such contradictory information? Except that the Wanderer acts as willingly against the Imperium as on its side. During the raid on the Forge world Vos Prime, Cypher appears in the center of a Black Legion Terminator squad. They broke through the adamantine gates into the tight corridors of the Iron Tower, where they seized ancient documents and then teleported back. In the eyes of the servants of the Imperium, only dealings with demons are worse than collaboration with heretics, and Cypher has acted more than once with notorious traitors. Blurred video recordings confirm that the warrior was often not just an accomplice, but a leader of bands of marauding cultists, renegades, and arch-enemies of the Imperium, betraying legionnaires. On the other hand, there are numerous testimonies of how Cypher has aided Imperium forces, acting alongside Imperial Guard regiments and even Space Marine chapters. During the Neveria Plague, it was Cypher who guided the Silver Skulls in the suppression of the Red Heresy. No one ever learned why the Wanderer first aided the renegades and then betrayed them. In the Battle of Monarch Prime, the mysterious warrior came to the aid of the besieged Cadian inhabitants when a fierce attack by the traitors commenced on the last line of defense. According to Sergeant Grunhelm's testimony, the last surviving soldier from the detachment, their commissar was torn to pieces, and in that very second, new orders echoed through the trench. The stranger, who wielded 2 pistols, behaved and commanded like an Imperial officer, and the Cadian inhabitants rallied around him, deciding that Astartes' reinforcements had finally arrived. Cypher personally led the defense, holding the enemy before the very doors of the bunker where the planetary governor was sheltered. So many traitors fell that their bodies clogged the trenches. The cultists surged like ocean waves, with enemy detachments rushing into battle one after the other, but they suffered heavy losses and retreated. Only a few of the Cadian inhabitants survived. The wounded continued to fight, and would have perished as well if not for the hooded warrior who shot with impeccable accuracy from his pistols. The wanderer vanished among the heaps of corpses, disappearing when the rapidly approaching land speeders of the Raven Wing came into view, headed towards the bunker. To better understand even a fragment of the enigma that is Cypher, one must delve into the history of the Dark Angels, which often becomes an insurmountable challenge for outsiders. The Dark Angels guard their secrets, veiling their actions under a shroud of rituals and covert operations. And within their chapter, the truth is known only to the native masters and the most distinguished warriors, known as the Inner Circle. In times past, during the final years of the Horus heresy, the native world of the Dark Angels, Caliban, was consumed by corruption. Luther, the second in command of the Legion, betrayed the Legion and led many brethren away from the Emperor. The traitors attacked their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, and his Legion upon their return to Caliban. The loyal warriors triumphed, but at what cost? Their home planet was shattered into pieces, and the Primarch vanished and was presumed dead. In the mortal hour of Caliban, a swirling vortex of warp storm was unleashed upon the world. Gates to the realm of chaos opened, and the gaping tear in reality swallowed the surviving traitors. It is believed that Cypher was among those heretics carried into the Immaterium, but to the great chagrin of the Dark Angels there is no complete list of those who heeded the dark temptations of the ruinous powers and turned against the Brethren. In the troubling days following the heresy, the entire galactic imperium of mankind stood on the brink of annihilation. Horus was defeated, and his surviving minions fled, filling the warriors of the Imperium with grief and a thirst for vengeance. The unforeseen betrayal of Horus continues to have repercussions to this day. Without the guidance of the Emperor, the guilty faced only harsh, relentless retribution, and the repression increased. The grim realization that the Space Marines, the perfect warriors of humankind, were vulnerable and capable of corruption, shocked everyone. Half of the legions proved to be among the traitors, and had the Dark Angels admitted that there were renegades among them as well, perhaps they would have been condemned as a whole. In this paranoid atmosphere, the surviving warriors deliberated possible actions, mourning the lost Primarch, and saw no other choice but to conceal the truth of the betrayal of the brothers. The senior officers of the Legion declared that no outsider should learn the dreadful truth. No one should know that the Dark Angels succumbed to corruption and turned to ruinous powers. After the fall of Caliban, the Legionnaires had much to do and many secrets to hide. The Dark Angels understood that the easiest way to avoid a barrage of questions was to fully commit to the righteous cause. However, they repeatedly had to explain the loss of their Primarch and home world, deceiving first the High Lords of Terror and subsequently the newly founded Inquisition. Since none of those who fought against the rebels demonstrated such fierce determination, there was no pressure on the grieving warriors. The Sons of the Lion continued to fight, pursuing the remnants of Horus's armies into the Eye of Terror and carrying out their bloody retribution. Meanwhile, on the largest shard of Caliban, a new home was being built. Over time, warp engines were installed on the rock, as it was simply called, allowing it to travel the galaxy. At first, it seemed that all the traitorous brothers had been destroyed in the hour of Caliban's fall, but this was not the case. Over time, the librarians of the Dark Angels discovered the characteristic traces of the lost brothers and realized that the fallen traitors, known as the Fallen Angels, or simply the Fallen, had not perished. They were scattered through time and space, for the librarians found evidence that many traitors, whose psychic powers flickered in various corners of the galaxy, had returned. Throughout all times, the Dark Angels held a single sentiment towards all fallen, for they had not yet encountered the most enigmatic and inventive among them, Cypher. To the surviving Dark Angels, the news that the traitors had escaped retribution was a torment, and as long as the fallen lived, the shame of the Legion lived, for they could tell of their betrayal. Therefore, anyone who met with the fallen now became a witness not only to the original treason but also to its concealment. When the terrible battle shattered Caliban, the fallen were cast into the warp. The currents of the warp are fickle. Time in the realm of chaos follows no rules. To the fallen, it might seem that they disappeared for mere seconds when many centuries had passed. Others spent entire epochs in the immaterium, where on the long journey through nightmare realms they endured unutterable torments, only to awaken moments after Caliban's destruction. To this day, among the fallen, there are those who have yet to return to the galaxy. The ruinous powers are truly cruel, and their capricious plans are inscrutable to mere mortals. Not all of the fallen angels succumbed to the gods of chaos equally. Some went completely insane during their journey through the warp, while others did so only upon their return. Ultimately, the fallen feel as if they were barely snatched from the crumbling surface of Caliban, although in reality this occurred many thousands of years ago. Some of the fallen, who faithfully followed Luther, became true Chaos Space Marines, but such rebels do not gather together like the legions that rose during the Horus Heresy. Individually or in small groups, they scattered across the Imperium and overnight sowed the realm of humanity with seeds ready to sprout future treachery. And from these seeds, tendrils of corruption extended, for the fallen began to form their own bands, cults, and even armies. During Caliban's destruction, some of the fallen were mere recruits, but there were also seasoned space marines among them. Even warriors of the first generation, created under the supervision of the Emperor himself, seasoned warriors who had fought many times in the Great Crusade, possessing rich combat experience and superhuman abilities, the fallen found easy paths to greatness on a galactic scale. Some came to rule planetary empires, while others sought revenge against the Imperium. Based on his martial prowess and capabilities, it can be assumed that by the time of the fall of Caliban, Cypher was already an experienced warrior, as later information confirmed. The Wanderer was evidently a high-ranking officer, playing an important role in the Legion's rituals. Throughout the galaxy, the Fallen ignited wars on planets, systems, and even entire sectors. Yet the Dark Angels were more troubled by the fact that the traitors were revealing those very secrets that the sons of Lion L. Johnson swore to protect. These Fallen followed Luther's teachings, believing the Emperor to be a liar, and that their superhuman abilities gave them the right to take whatever they desired and to command the weak. The Fallen saw no reason not to fight for themselves, as it was better than becoming warriors once more for an ungrateful and degenerating regime. But not all of the Fallen sank so low. Some, freed from Luther's compelling rhetoric, realized for the first time how far they had strayed on the path of betrayal. Cast into the galaxy and horrified by their own corruption, these warriors tried to dissolve among humans, some merely hiding, while others sought to atone for their guilt. Many became mercenaries, roaming the galaxy for money rather than a higher purpose. Often they easily managed to hide on the outskirts of the Imperium, for among the stars lay countless colonies, tyrannized communities, mining stations, smuggler spaceports, all these settlements hidden from prying eyes, concealed in the fissures of humanity's monolithic dominions. But for the Dark Angels, all subsequent actions of the Fallen are meaningless, for they believe they can rid themselves of dishonor and restore trust in the eyes of the Emperor only when they capture and compel the repentance of, or destroy, every Fallen. This has never been an easy task, as the traitors have been scattered individually or in small groups across space and time, and the Dark Angels can battle for years without even hearing a whisper of their perfidious kin. Of all the Fallen, none provoke such hatred and, possibly, fear in the Dark Angels as the enigmatic Cypher. After several initial encounters, the Dark Angels began to understand that the fallen were varied. The Sons of the Lion increasingly approached the unpredictable Cypher with caution, repeatedly slipping from their grasp. The Space Marines did not fear enemies and were always steadfast in battle, but they began to fear the mysterious wanderer, fear what he might be, fear that perhaps he is their reflection and the embodiment of their demise. Most of those knowledgeable about Cypher consider him a villain. What catastrophes could occur if he fulfills his unknown plan? There are even rumors that Cypher intends to kill the Emperor. A small part of the inner circle, not the interrogator chaplains, but warriors with open minds, consider other possibilities. Perhaps Cypher seeks to repent, to atone for the sins of his fallen brothers, or to divert humanity from its predestined path, known only to him. The angels do not speak of this, for such a thought is more disturbing. It signifies that the Dark Angels are once again on the wrong side. Wherever and whenever Cypher appears, misfortune follows. His presence heralds the arrival of new fallen, though it remains unclear whether they are responding to his call or if the Wanderer himself foresees their approach. At times, Cypher acts alongside demagogues, inciting human discontent, and sometimes he collaborates with military forces. With alarming regularity, the Wanderer appears at a critical moment, and his presence each time triggers a chain of the most unpredictable events. Cypher has been sighted with entire armies, though it can never be said for certain whether he was merely a soldier or a commander. The Wanderer is more dangerous than the most experienced masters of sabotage, and his appearance in even the most harmless situations has led to chaos, altering the outcome of entire wars. Cypher, more frequently than other fallen, operates as a covert assassin, leaving behind a trail of influential victims, though he rarely pulls the trigger himself. The Dark Angels exert considerable effort to prove that Cypher selects his targets and executes the sentence. However, more often than not, the facts leading them to such a conclusion are quite contradictory. The only definite statement is that death and destruction follow the Wanderer closely. Cypher's designs are as inscrutable as everything connected to him. Among his confirmed victims, according to the records of the Dark Angels, were planetary governors, leaders of Chaos Space Marines, Grand Masters of loyal chapters, covens of sorcerers, cult leaders, and high-ranking inquisitors. Naturally, the Dark Angels have never shared these so-called evidences with anyone outside the closed circles of the Order of the Heirs. As paradoxical as it may seem, in just 50 years, Cypher's actions led to the demise of both the malevolent and corrupt Fabian the Golden, leader of the Immaculate Regiment, and the brave and loyal Bartholomew Lockslaw, Grand Master of the Angels of Purification. The Imperium dispatched fleets, armies, and assassins to end the rule of Overfiend Tyrannex. However, all efforts resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands, while Cypher managed single-handedly to locate his fortress, fight his way inside, and shoot the villain, liberating billions from his ruthless dominion in an instant. Cypher's tracks meander around the Dark Angel's path, which he intentionally crosses over and over. After killing Overfiend Tyrannex, riddling him with unique plasma burns and bolt fragmentations characteristic of his pistols, Cypher dared to install a locator beacon for the Dark Angels in the fortress. Mere hours later, the rock appeared nearby, and the Deathwing Terminators teleported into the throne room, but Cypher had already vanished. Cypher's prolonged existence has itself become evidence of his near-supernatural ability to elude pursuit. For many centuries, in the inner circle of the Dark Angels, it is believed that the Wanderer is protected by a higher power. His entire life journey began even before the Horus Heresy, although once the Grand Master of the Dark Angels, Raphaelus, suggested that Cypher might not be one person. How else to explain his longevity and seeming invulnerability? It is possible that Cypher is merely a mask, a role assumed by a successor. Ironically, Raphaelus was one of the two Grand Masters whose life ended during the hunt for Cypher, although in both cases it was never proven that their deaths were caused by the sworn enemy of the Dark Angels. Over many centuries, the Order has discovered many of its fallen brothers. Some of them committed horrific crimes that tarnished their honor and the honor of the great Primarch. but none have managed to draw as much hatred from the inner circle as Cypher. Even Marbus, the only fallen who rose to the rank of demon prince, does not provoke such anger. For the capture of Cypher, the Dark Angels would commit any atrocity, no matter how terrible it might be. As with everything related to Cypher, it is very difficult to say anything definite about his origin. To begin understanding him, one must descend deep into the dungeons of the rock and pass through the adamantium doors into the Hall of Mysteries, where the remnants of the Order's ancient manuscripts are kept. On carefully preserved scrolls, writings can still be discerned, which, in their time, all the Grand Masters of the Dark Angels Librarium attempted to decipher. The Order arose in a period when Caliban was a death world, as deadly as any similar planet in the galaxy. Cut off from terror, civilization regressed to a feudal system, and Caliban, ravaged by warp storms, almost entirely disappeared under a canopy of monster-infested forests. Travel between distant human fortresses almost always meant certain death. The forests expanded, enclosing the people of Caliban in isolated settlements surrounding ancient strongholds. Within stone walls, peasants could clear the land of trees and earn a living by growing food. The nobility ruled Caliban, clad in protective power armor, and their duty was to guard the cleared lands from predatory beasts. The people of this planet were resilient and valued bravery and mastery of arms. Life was hard and often brief, a constant struggle against packs of wild creatures and hideously mutated beasts. Many knightly orders formed over the ages, the most renowned of which was simply called the Order. This brotherhood earned an outstanding reputation among the many noble houses and knightly organizations. The Order was renowned for its allegiance to principles and skill, as well as its unique recruitment methods. For the Caliban nobility, lineage meant a great deal, but the Order chose its brothers for passing tests and mastery of arms. Bands of knight brothers travelled from stronghold to stronghold, aiding in the endless battle to cleanse the lands of forest and monsters. The Order distinguished itself through asceticism, and its numerous rituals were simple yet exacting. To preserve proud traditions, the ruling magistrates selected a warrior, the Lord Cypher, or Cypher as he would later be known. Upon accepting the title, the Lord renounced his name, hiding beneath a cloak and hood. Other knights were forbidden to address this brother, for the Lord Cypher was to forget his old identity and from that day forth embody the laws, customs, and strict orders of the Order. He was tasked with ensuring that traditions were not forgotten, and neither recruit nor magistrate deviated from the high ideals of the Order. The Lord became an advisor to the magistrates on all matters of protocol and attended all significant ceremonies. The position of Lord Cypher was held in high esteem, and the Order regarded it with utmost seriousness. For the knights knew that decline and destruction were parts of the galaxy's nature. The fallen Cypher, a harbinger of destruction, in practice embodies many ancient dogmas, although no one can say for certain if there is a connection between them. Records taken from Caliban, now stored in the Tower of Angels, are incomplete, particularly in chronicles preserved from the time when Luther turned from the Emperor's light. Many librarians and magistrates of the Dark Angels have studied them, yet found no answers. The title of Lord Cypher is mentioned, but it does not state who held this post, nor when it was assumed. Disparate testimonies indicate that some of Luther's subordinates, both veterans and recruits, rejected the new doctrines, remaining loyal to the Legion, Lion L. Johnson, and their emperor. The warriors who did not side with the traitors are unnamed, but it seems they engaged in battle after the appearance of the Dark Angels' fleet. As a sign of their rejection of Luther, some loyalists repainted their armor. This possibly points to the true reason why the Legion changed its colors from black to green after the fall of Caliban. The ancient chronicles also contain passages that have yet to be deciphered, as they are written in secret scripts. There is speculation that this is mere folly, akin to the mad ravings of Luther himself, but until the records are decrypted, no one knows for sure. The Dark Angels believe that their duty, their penance, is to hunt the treacherous brethren. They will call themselves the Unforgiven as long as even one unrepentant fallen breathes. So it was in the times when the proud Legion was divided after the Horus heresy. along with all chapters of loyal Space Marines during the second founding. The Imperium no longer knows exactly how many successor chapters were created from the surviving legions. Many of the newly formed organizations still exist today, but some have been destroyed, and others have lost their knowledge and forgotten their history amidst the war. The Dark Angels seized upon this circumstance, concealing a portion of their past, while claiming their archives were damaged by the explosion of an overloaded plasma reactor during the refitting of the rock, which is yet another lie, as the chapter itself destroyed these records. The Dark Angels are aware of the concern caused by their close ties with many chapters, but this is not all they conceal. They do not speak of the loss of the last of those created from the gene seed of the Dark Angels, the unfortunate Morning Lions, or of those times. It was then, perhaps, that they first encountered Cypher, and the history of the Forgotten Wars, a long military campaign that followed, is known only to the highest-ranking members of the Inner Circle. Only after an exhausting hunt and a series of fierce battles did the Sons of the Lion begin to realize that Cypher was far more dangerous than ordinary Fallen. It all began innocuously enough. The ships of the Angels of Vengeance, pursuing the remnants of an Orc fleet, entered the Gothic sector. Under the pretext of seeking surviving greenskins they were tasked to destroy, the Space Marines sought clues that might lead them to the Fallen. This was the standard tactic of all the Unforgiven, pursuing their own secret objectives while ostensibly fulfilling the orders and edicts of the Lords of Terror. During long-range scanning and extensive report collection, the Angels of Vengeance found nothing except an encrypted signal originating from the mining world of Lemnos. The encrypted message described precisely what the Unforgiven were seeking. This world was engulfed in a brutal war over mining rights, a war driven by greed rather than ideals. As long as the tithe was paid, the Imperium did not interfere, leaving the problem to the planetary governor. Rival factions of aristocrats sent private armies to seize the richest mineral veins. One such battle was reported in the enigmatic message which was written in the old combat codes of the Dark Angels, containing enough clues consistent with Fallen behavior. According to the message, the leader of one of the mercenary bands fighting on Lemnos almost single-handedly turned the tide of battle and appeared to be fighting in an old model power armor. It is not easy to conceal extensive genetic modification, and the Unforgiven have long learned to pay heed to rumors of individuals with superhuman abilities. Often this proved to be misinformation, exaggeration, or merely warriors in excellent armor, but at times such leads pointed to mutants, hidden psychers, Xenos shapeshifters, and Chaos Space Marines. The Dark Angels pursued the trail further only when there was hope of encountering a Fallen, and in the most promising cases, they endeavored to bring one of their librarians closer to the quarry for an unequivocal assessment. At close range, librarians from the Unforgiven chapters can detect the unique psychic traces of those who carry the legacy of their common Primarch. Even the tainted gene seed of the Lion emits a distinctive and sufficiently powerful signal. Of course, even such a method is not flawless, as results may fluctuate due to warp flux or be blocked by psychic suppressors. Additionally, not all the Fallen bear pure gene seed. When the First Legion reached Caliban and reunited with their Primarch, they accepted many warriors into their ranks. The young knights received the gene seed implant, while those too old, such as the arch-traitor Luther, were transformed into elite soldiers through other procedures. In the case of Lemnos, the librarians detected multiple readings. The primary target, a massive man called the Fleshcrafter, raised alarm with his superhuman strength. Remote psychic scans by the librarians of the Angels of Vengeance detected the characteristic signs of a warrior with the gene seed of the Dark Angels Legion, and Terminators of the First Company were dispatched to intercept. However, other readings were also discovered nearby. One of the signals flickered, usually associated with warp storms, which were not detected nearby. This was the first documented detection of unique signals later associated with Cypher. It remains unclear whether he was the first, brought another Fallen, or was working with the Fleshcrafter from the beginning. The strike team captured the Fleshcrafter but suffered heavy losses. As the Terminators approached the gang, one of the mercenaries managed to break through. In those times, neither the cloaked stranger nor his unusually deadly shots from pistols and subsequent escape and disappearances were familiar, and the loss of many Terminators seemed extremely strange. Experienced warriors in nearly impenetrable armor rarely perished, and only to the dreadful weapons of mighty champions, not at the hands of a fugitive soldier from a gang of inept mercenaries. Since the rock was located in the neighboring sector, the fleshcrafter soon found himself in its deep dungeons. Convinced by the harsh treatment of the interrogator chaplains and endless mind scans, the warrior revealed that he was once known by another, older name. Before remorse and release from the burden of life, he nearly divulged everything demanded of him, naming a dozen brothers he had seen in the sector. Detachments of the Angels of Vengeance, Dark Angels and the Lions of Mourning were dispatched in pursuit, and each stop on the new path from landing to boarding the abandoned wanderer in deep space brought new leads to the Unforgiven. Each time awaited a new revelation. As pieces of information were relayed to the rock, an increasingly ominous picture emerged. The Unforgiven sought out individual traitors, but found a corruption spreading across 6 systems of the Gothic sector. Due to separate clandestine deals and interplanetary meetings, a coherent and sinister system was forming, bearing all the hallmarks of an intricate conspiracy of the Alpha Legion, at the time mistakenly believed to be destroyed within the Imperium. Amid the leads and intersecting chains of evidence in the sector, the trace of a man twisted, provoking a growing morbid interest from the librarians of the Dark Angels, Cypher. At times, wandering souls showed psychic signs of the fallen, evidence of the Primarch's blood. However, at other times the mental probes of the librarians could detect nothing but a brief flash of a signal, as if something else was intercepting it. Prolonged scanning revealed something else, a hungry void, a cold nothingness that followed Cypher like a shadow through the immaterium. Since then, his ability to remain hidden had been confirmed repeatedly, though it was unclear whether this was due to innate psychic powers or an unknown artifact. For now, the Dark Angels and Angels of Vengeance had managed to achieve a great deal. They deployed strike teams everywhere, varying in size from small detachments to full companies. This allowed them to pursue their secret objectives while simultaneously fulfilling all orders issued by the High Lords of Terror. However, the pursuit of Cypher stretched out over decades until it came to a halt when it led to the densely populated world of Brygia. It was determined that the commander of the Planetary Defense Forces, Grand Captain Tilius, was likely a fallen one as well. He had certainly recently communicated with Cypher and was cautious, as if forewarned about the hunt. Tilius hid within the most fortified system of fortresses under the protection of an entire army. Since the forces of Supreme Grandmaster Person were scattered across the Gothic sector, he gathered all the Unforgiven he could. At those times, the Purifying Angels were on the galactic east and could not send aid, but the Angels of Redemption and the Mourning Lions responded to the call. Space Marines descended from Lionel Johnson were always famous for their meticulous and flawless battle plans, as was confirmed in the assault on the most fortified fortress of Brygia. Precisely calculated drops of drop pods delivered warriors and bunker-crushing dreadnoughts to the surface. Pinpoint strikes by land speeder units pinned enemies with fire on the fortress walls and destroyed gun turrets. Thanks to well-thought-out coordinated actions, the Unforgiven broke through the outer defences and prepared for the second phase of the operation. The final assaults on the keep, where Grand Captain Tilius hid, were underway when suddenly something unforeseen occurred. Supreme Grandmaster Person had not considered 2 factors. First, a new target appeared on the battlefield, Cypher. The Unforgiven had pursued his trail for so long and were so angry from constant failures that they now threw all their forces into capturing him. His appearance in the trenches immediately drew Terminators from the reserve, teleporting to the surface and attempting to surround their quarry. But Grand Captain Tilius was a calculating tactician and chose this moment to deploy his own unengaged reserve. A large detachment of Chaos Terminators teleported to the aid of the keep's defenders, and hordes of cultists poured in from nearby cities. Tilius was indeed a fallen one and had made a dark deal. entangled in the web of the Alpha Legion's schemes. Skirmishes and covert operations of the Unforgiven across the sector culminated in a battle within the network of bunkers, fierce, prolonged, and blood-soaked. Cypher moved swiftly and confidently across the battlefield. In the maze of trenches, it was difficult to track him, and if not for the land speeders hovering overhead, the Dark Angels would have lost sight of him and become disoriented, unsure in which bunker the Fallen was hiding. The Unforgiven repeatedly flushed their prized quarry from cover. Flames roared everywhere around, and the cloaked wanderer blazed a path with twin pistols. Through the volleys of twin-linked bolters, Cypher broke through to the assault door of the underground complex. A shot from his plasma pistol in maximum setting melted the reinforced plasteel, allowing him to vanish into the tunnels. The nearest detachment of the Deathwing was already widening the breach with their fists when the Chaos Terminator counterattack commenced. Soon, the Unforgiven were embroiled in a fierce battle. The massive Dark Angels exchanged fearsome blows with their traitorous kin. The battle was brutal, and their quarry had likely already escaped. Yet the Unforgiven did not retreat. Known for their stubbornness, the true Sons of the Lion decimated the advancing horde of cultists. At first, it seemed the forces of the warring Terminators were evenly matched, but righteous fury allowed the Unforgiven to prevail. Finally, the last squad of vile traitors was obliterated by the precise salvo of a Landspeeder's plasma storm battery. Only then could the Unforgiven continue the pursuit of Cypher and storm the final stronghold. But it was already too late, as both Cypher and Tilius had escaped. On Bridgia, it became clear that the Chaos Space Marines were closely collaborating with the Fallen, and no one was surprised when the trail led the Unforgiven through the Gothic sector to the most despised refuge of traitors, the Eye of Terror. Reports of the Dark Angels' activities on Bridgia had already reached Terra, and questions poured onto the rock. But as they prepared explanations for why the forces appeared so far from the planets mentioned in the orders, the Unforgiven carved a path into the Forbidden Zones. The Eye of Terror, the most terrifying part of the galaxy, a breach in reality where warp energy spills into the world. The raging vortex not only harbors monstrous warp storms, but also serves as a relatively safe haven for legions of Chaos Space Marines. Even merely tracking a signal in such a place is perilous. Psychers who open their minds in the Eye of Terror can become victims of the malign forces dwelling beyond. But the librarians of the Dark Angels dared to draw the attention of the darkness to achieve their goals and follow the trail to the outer twin planets, Cocytus I and II, which were not yet fully engulfed in chaotic energies but were celestial bodies orbiting the fringe of the chilling sector, a region of space only rarely swallowed by the Immaterium. A journey perilously close to the Eye of Terror was forbidden, yet a council of the Inner Circle was convened to discuss it. This region was notoriously unstable, and while traversing it, one had to navigate around temporal vortices, spatial anomalies, and possibly fleets of traitors. The danger also stemmed from Imperial defense elements, eavesdropping posts, and drifting minefields extending to fortified worlds. Entering the Eye of Terror undetected would be challenging. After the operation on Bridgia, several Inquisitors were already tasked with investigating the appearance of the vile Alpha Legion, and the Dark Angels could hardly welcome additional attention. However, all progeny of the Dark Angels inherited the legendary stubbornness of their Primarch, and thus they were undeterred by such complexities. Despite their outward calm, inside they were seething with rage. For the Unforgiven, it was unbearable to think that the long and arduous pursuit across an entire sector might end in vain. They yearned to respond to insults, to engage the enemy. Supreme Grandmaster Person agreed to send a strike force to the very edge of the Eye of Terror, and thus the Unforgiven dispatched the strike cruiser of the Morning Lions, the Fury of Caliban, into the roiling clouds of mist. Aboard it were companies drawn from the ranks of the Dark Angels, the Angels of Vengeance, the Angels of Redemption, and the Lions themselves. Initially, all proceeded well. They had forced their way through the yards into the storms and emerged into real space, bypassing all Imperial stations. Communication with the Rock was unreliable, but the fury of Caliban reached orbit around Cocytus Primus. A strike force was immediately deployed. In such proximity to the Eye of Terror, all readings and long-range scan results were distorted and communication fluctuated. Uncertain of what to expect from a world so often engulfed by the madness of the Eye of Terror, the initial group headed to the source of the last signal transmissions. They encountered a mist-enshrouded, desolate, rocky planet. Here and there stood stone arches and fallen columns, remnants of ancient civilizations. On the weathered and time-eroded ruins were evident signs of warp corruption, symbols of death and grimacing faces emerging from the very stones. The Unforgiven warily made their way through the eerie landscape, unsure of what they were searching for, but upon seeing, they immediately knew they were on the right path. Ahead, rising from the swirling mists, stood a fortress reminiscent of the Angel's own Tower of the Rock. Walls and parapets, clad in plasteel and adamantium, were bristling with weapons, visibly emblazoned with the familiar symbols of the Dark Angels, winged figures with a sword. But it then became clear that the fortress was built not out of respect, but in mockery. That was the Tower of the Fallen Angels. Grim skulls grinned from beneath their hoods, heads adorned with spikes hung above the walls, and iron cages revealed the mangled remnants of the Sons of the Lion's armor. Reinforcements were required, as it seemed a nest of the fallen was present. But the Dark Angels were cautious, for sooner or later Cocytus would once again be engulfed in raging storms. After detecting a characteristic Cypher signal on the planet, Supreme Grandmaster Person commanded an attack and dispatched a second ship. Thus began the Forgotten Wars. A brutal battle on Cocytus I ensued, involving half of the Dark Angels and Angels of Redemption, 3 companies of Angels of Vengeance, and the entire chapter of the Lion's Sable. Corruption took root, storms surrounded the planets, and a battle raged on Cocytus. The Unforgiven dismantled one cultist, mutant and heretic den after another, carving their way deeper into the wastelands of both planets. Cypher had already slipped away from them twice, but greater fury was stirred by his message, where the Wanderer urged the Sons of the Lion to leave and claimed they were heading into a trap. Person was forced to grudgingly acknowledge Cypher's probable correctness, and just as he ordered a retreat, warp storms descended upon the region. The Grand Master did not want to flee from the battle, but sensed that time was running out. Yet the Lion's Sable did not comply. Since the division into chapters, each successor was meant to be autonomous, although the Dark Angels secretly retained control over their progeny, exceeding the dogmas of the second founding. Their Primarch, Lion L. Johnson, had refused to retreat and surrender so many times that the disobedience of the Lions seemed only to align with the spirit of their great ancestor. And then Person hesitated. Taking only his bodyguards, the Grand Master headed back to the planet. He ordered the fleet of 6 ships then in orbit to leave the Eye of Terror. He planned to contact them once the storms calmed. At that time, no one suspected. But this was the last occasion anyone saw either Person or the Lion's Sable. The storms only grew stronger. Swirling spiral waves expanded as pure chaos spewed forth from the heart of the Eye of Terror, and the frigate Vendetta disappeared into the warp. The turmoil of the Immaterium allowed the fleet of the Unforgiven to slip unnoticed into the impenetrable darkness through the Cadian Gate. Only they survived to report what transpired on the rock. To their astonishment, they discovered that though it seemed as if the warriors had been gone for only a few years in the storms, 10 centuries had passed in the real world. Small excursions were undertaken in search of the brothers, but all ended in failure. When the whirlwinds finally subsided, a small strike force was sent back into the Eye of Terror, but found no trace of Cocytus I or its twin, as if the Eye had swallowed them. But Cypher returned, and much sooner. The signal characteristic of him appeared in the same system where the rock was located, from which hastily assembled hunting teams were immediately dispatched. The Wanderer once again vanished, leading them to an empty cathedral of the Emperor on a desolate planet. There they found, left in plain sight, the Sword of Secrets and the Lion Helm. the most valuable relics of the chapter, worn by supreme Grand Masters. Whether Cocytus was a trap or a trial, the Unforgiven suffered heavy losses there, and these events profoundly impacted the Sons of the Lion. To conceal the losses of warriors presumed lost in the warp, the Angels of Vengeance and Redemption utilized resources from the recruiting world of the Lion's Sable. The Inner Circle decided to destroy all records of this war, and thus the Dark Angels staged a fake plasma explosion aboard the Rock. Greatly aiding their concealment of information was the largest Orc invasion in the history of the Imperium and the political aftermath of the beheading, when assassins slew the High Lords of Terror. No one ever learned that, fortunately for the Unforgiven, 3 Inquisitors, secretly ordered to investigate the strange actions of the Dark Angels, perished in inexplicable incidents. Returning from Cocytus, the brothers were dispersed among the Unforgiven to conceal the sudden increase in their numbers, and for the rest of their lives, company chaplains kept a watchful eye on them to prevent the long-term effects of the warp from spreading corruption. The Dark Angels do not speak of the forgotten wars, nor do they tell tales of them to the newly inducted. They exerted great effort in erasing from the accessible Adeptus Terra archives all mentions of this campaign and the Lion's Sable. But the custom and motto of the Sons of Lionel Johnson state that nothing is forgotten and nothing is forgiven. Deep in the dungeons of the Rock, surviving records are hidden, from which the members of the Inner Circle learn of the heroic sacrifice that will remain secret. Over the course of the 1,000-year hunt for the Fallen, the Unforgiven have tracked and captured hundreds of their cursed brothers. For the sake of this task, they even altered the organization of the chapter. Of course, the Ravenwing and Deathwing are unique to the Dark Angels, but most of their successors also have their equivalents. The Unforgiven track down any Fallen, any suspected Fallen, and even anyone suspected of speaking with a Fallen. The captives are placed in the stasis tomb of the Dark Talon and taken to the Rock, where, accompanied by a solemn procession, they are led into the deep dungeons. In the bowels of the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels, in catacombs accessible only to the highest members of the Inner Circle, all captives face their doom. Using the psychic powers of the Grand Master Librarians, the Interrogator Chaplains seek 2 answers from the Fallen. First and foremost, they want to hear everything about the traitor, his history, goals and actions before and after the fall of Caliban. Secondly, and more importantly, they strive to extract repentance from the guilty, for only a fully repentant Fallen can find redemption. With each passing year, all Dark Angels stray further from the path, but some venture further than others. Once considered dishonorable, long and brutal tortures have now become a standard part of the approach of any Interrogator Chaplain. For the confession of Asmodai, the current senior Interrogator Chaplain, he is ready to subject prisoners to any suffering. Such a fate awaits Cypher should he ever be captured. Over the millennia, Cypher's trail has repeatedly led the Unforgiven to new revelations, evidence leading to the capture of the Fallen, the tendrils of corruption that have secretly infiltrated the Imperium, or even the discovery of new, ideal recruiting worlds. If not for the pursuit of Cypher, the Angels of Vengeance would not have realized that the death world of Damnia could become one of the main recruitment bases. But not all revelations uncovered during the hunt for Cypher have been benevolent. The audacious and overconfident commanders of the Ravenwing have made dreadful mistakes more than once upon seeing the Wanderer on the battlefield, and only those in the second company of the Dark Angels who can tenaciously pursue and discern the enemy's tricks and traps may endure. At times, it is difficult to understand whether the Unforgiven chapters are hunting Cypher or vice versa, for the Wanderer likes to appear on the battlefield at such inconvenient moments for the Sons of the Lion that they cannot capture him. Perhaps the most famous of such instances occurred during the final battle of the War of the Red Stars. In a desperate attempt to decapitate the advancing Warg, the entire chapter of the Dark Angels was thrown into battle, hoping that the Deathwing would draw into combat and annihilate Zogax the Great War Boss before the Green Tide could overthrow the Space Marines. But all hopes were dashed when the mechs deployed a suppression device that prevented the Deathwing from teleporting anywhere close to the boss. The valiant Supreme Grandmaster Alokan led his command squad and the third company in an assault, attempting to break through the ranks of the armoured guards of boss Zogax. Yet with the support of massive war machines, the orcs managed to repulse them. When Alokan was confronted by the chain-axe-wielding war boss, the assault nearly stalled. Alas, Supreme Grandmaster Alokan fell, but when Zogax reached for the lion's helm, his arm was vaporized by a plasma charge. Infuriated with rage and astonishment, the enormous war boss looked ahead and received a rapid burst of slugs into his healthy and bionically enhanced eye. Even bereft of the back of his head and most of his brains, Zogax fought for some time before collapsing and convulsing. Cypher appeared. He was constantly on the move and unleashed a hurricane of fire from 2 pistols. The plasma pistol was powerful enough to melt the tough armor of the orcs, while the bolt pistol shot struck precisely at the joints of the armor and exposed orc helmets. Under the barrage of fire, many greenskins fell, with fountains of blood, steam and black oil bursting forth from their punctured, cumbersome armor. Having holstered their guns, Cypher dragged Alokan and his precious relics towards the nearest trench and then disappeared. Ignoring the surviving orcs, the advancing Dark Angels concentrated their fire on the enigmatic ally, but he soon vanished behind the smoking hulls of the machines. A few moments later, the teleportation-suppressing force field ceased to function, and the arrival of the first company ensured victory. However, by that time, Cypher had already disappeared. The legendary Cypher, a mysterious loner fighting for freedom, is known throughout the galaxy by many names. He is often mistakenly referred to as the savior of Praxis, the shadowy trickster of the Nova Terra rebellions, and more recently the voice of the Emperor. It remains unclear whether Cypher has earned these nicknames or if his mere presence sparked another wave of rumors. When the Wanderer appears on a planet, he easily instigates discontented masses into rebellion, which alarms the Imperium, but no one can say for certain whether he employs persuasion, sorcery, or as yet undiscovered psychic powers. It is also difficult to understand what Cypher calls upon the countless billions to do, whether to rise against oppression or for justice in the galaxy, or perhaps he merely appears simultaneously while someone else engages in incitement. One thing is certain: the Wanderer's appearances unfailingly provoke a swift response. Whether Cypher manipulates probability with the warp, or simply meticulously plans his operations, either way, to suppress the largest and most Cypher-provoked uprisings, one of the chapters of the Unforgiven is most often dispatched. Sometimes they uncover chaos cultists or intrigues of the Alpha Legion hidden behind speakers' rhetoric, and frequently the Fallen participate in the growing anarchy. Only by pursuing Cypher do the Unforgiven find and capture the culprits, but often the Wanderer deliberately helps the Fallen escape. The Dark Angels firmly believe that Cypher possesses an extraordinary ability to involve others in his schemes. Some play the role of bodyguards, willing to give their lives for him, while others would be horrified to learn the cunning deceiver they support. But their former ally is not who he claims to be. In battles, Cypher has been accompanied by both insurgents and squads of Chaos Terminators, along with demon princes. He has gathered and led the Fallen who have fought since the fall of Caliban and fought alongside massive war machines of the Dark Mechanicum. Cypher has fought shoulder to shoulder with the forces of the Imperium, often in the guise of a loyalist Astartes, directing Imperial guardsmen and detachments of other space marines. All are united only in their service to Cypher's schemes, and after fulfilling his plans, he easily abandons them to their fate. He sacrifices their lives without hesitation if it delays the pursuit even temporarily. The Unforgiven themselves pursue Cypher regardless of whom he surrounds himself with, which often leads the Dark Angels into direct conflict with their allies. Some, such as the Silver Skulls and Black Templars, regard the Unforgiven with hostility and distrust, preferring to avoid them. Much is revealed about Cypher by the sword he carries. Each time he appears, the Wanderer always bears a sword. Yet, no matter how brutal the battle, he has never drawn the blade for defense or attack, even when a pistol is knocked from his hands. Some of the Unforgiven believe it is the legendary lion sword, the blade of the Primarch which disappeared with the lion. Others consider it a new weapon, forged from the same meteorite as the blades that descended from the heavens now borne by the leaders of the Dark Angels. Some warriors of the inner circle entertained thoughts about Luther's black sword, the weapon of the treacherous betrayer, which may have slain the Primarch and then vanished in a warp storm. They believe Cypher intends to reach Terra and draw the sword for the first and last time to slay the Emperor and cast him down from the Golden Throne. Others, however, believe that the Wanderer wishes to kneel before the Emperor and present him with the blessed sword, seeking forgiveness for his brothers. Ultimately, it can only be said with certainty that the sword is yet another enigma. The duty of the Inquisition is to seek answers, hunt down heretics, and uncover mysteries that threaten the imperium of mankind. Although generally the majority of the imperial bureaucracy does not involve the Astartes with the Inquisitors, they must tread carefully. The Inquisition exists outside the standard hierarchy, and as its power stems from the Emperor himself, it is entitled to interrogate anyone. Lies and concealment draw Inquisitors just as predators are drawn to the scent of blood, and at the sole command of the High Inquisitor, entire worlds may burn. If necessary, their rights extend even to the home planets and recruitment processes of the Space Marines. It is difficult to say precisely how much credible information about Cypher the Inquisition holds. After the mysterious disaster of their homeworld, the Dark Angels have been the subject of numerous investigations. Usually, however, they bore no fruit. Inquisitors suddenly found themselves with more pressing matters. They were misled or even slain. Nevertheless, suspicious cases, such as the incident involving the Angels of Redemption, who abandoned their allies to pursue someone, the emergence of the name Cypher, and the purity with which rumors about him arise are invariably noted. There have been occasions where Cypher had to obscure not only his tracks, but the errors of the Unforgiven as well. Testimonies and suspicions remain. But now, with the Imperium beset from all sides, a full-scale investigation is yet to be conducted. However, sooner or later the Inquisition will join the hunt for Cypher, unless it already has. The pistols of Cypher are difficult to observe in detail, for the Wanderer draws his weapons, fires and holsters them with dizzying speed. Thus, the pistols, like all things associated with Cypher, evoke only speculation. Judging by their design, they are clearly ancient, perhaps even predating the Imperium itself. The plasma pistol exhibits many of the distinctive features of the weapons favored by the Dark Angels. The energy pulse, the roar of the shots, and the humming discharge are reminiscent of the glorious relics stored in the arsenals of the First Legion. The following tale of Cypher's appearance is connected with Abaddon, also known as Abaddon the Despoiler. Typhus's ships, Herald of Nurgle, were spreading diseases through the sectors surrounding Cadia, while the Night Lords led by Tarak Darkblood carved a bloody path through Imperial space with deadly delight. The Cadian sector staggered under this dual assault and was ultimately fated to fall. Abaddon was surrounded by numerous scrying stones, suspended in blazing energy fields, each one reflecting diverse torments and scenes of destruction. In one, the warriors of the World Eaters were slaughtering screaming Imperial soldiers, and in another, on a plague-stricken, corpse-laden wasteland, pyres with the dead were burning. The images of carnage and war, of armies marching into battle and conquered worlds, captivated Abaddon's senses, and the images and sounds of the burning galaxy brought him true enjoyment. Yet the joy quickly faded. Barely had one of the thralls approached him servilely, croaking, "Master, he is here," did the grotesque creature pronounce. Abaddon glanced around. His bodyguards among the Terminators closed ranks around him as a robed figure appeared in the dimly lit bridge, the already blurred outlines swathed in shadows. Beneath the light clothing, the newcomer wore dark armor. From the crossed holsters protruded a pair of ornate pistol grips. Noticing them, one of the Terminators stepped forward. With a metallic screech, storm claws extended from their sheaths, crackling arcs of electricity lighting up the blades. Abaddon watched the newcomer's reaction keenly as the Terminator advanced on him. Abaddon hadn't even blinked before the man had drawn a pistol and fired. A blinding beam of searing flame struck the Terminator. The warrior sank heavily to his knees and collapsed onto the deck with a smouldering hole in his chest plate. The other Terminators immediately raised their weapons, but Abaddon halted them with a gesture as the man twirled the pistol and smoothly returned it to its holster. "Is it done?" Abaddon asked. "It is done," confirmed the newcomer. "The worlds of the Agrippina sector are engulfed in uprisings, and at Piscine 4 I gave the Sons of the Lion another reason to hate me." "Another twist of the knife in the flesh of the Unforgiven?" "Exactly. And what do you want from me?" "Nothing, but when the Tower of Angels comes to exact vengeance, you will leave it to me." "Is that all?" "That's all," replied the cloaked figure, turning towards the exit. Abaddon nodded thoughtfully. "My spies report to me that across the Imperium, resistance to the chaos wrought by you is spreading. The congregation's faith in the false emperor has grown even stronger than before. So tell me, why should I be grateful to you for this?" The man in the robe glanced around. "Kedia lies before you, Abaddon, compared to which everything else in your war is but mere scenery. So why are you concerned with my plans? Because nothing will impede my final victory. My intentions will not hinder this," the warrior assured. "Otherwise your soul is doomed, I swear by all the demons of chaos." Abaddon promised. The warrior in the robe nodded, accepting Abaddon's threat, and slipped from the command bridge into the darkness. Abaddon turned his gaze back to Kedia and grasped it with the claw of Horus. "You may draw your own conclusions about what this meeting was related to. Whether this deal was for a noble purpose or a sacrifice to the gods of chaos, for the powers reportedly possessed by Cypher, as many sources from the ancient archives of the Imperium indicate, no one knows for sure.